And welcome everybody to our Cassandra certification workshop. Today, we'll get started here in a minute. For now, just sit back, chill, watch a music video on databases, and enjoy a nice EDM track. And we'll get started here soon. And welcome everybody to our Cassandra certification workshop. Today I'm David Jones Gilardi, joined by David Chung. Hello, David Chung.
Hey, David, and hello, everybody. Welcome.
Hello, hello. Now, if for those of you who are joining us today, hi, Ian, and hello, Gordon. Hey, Gordon Moore. Hey, evening. Yes, we do also realize it's not the morning for everybody or the afternoon. It's evening, so good day to all of the time zones. But if you can hear us loud and clear, give us a thumbs up in the chats. Let us know that everything sounds good. Hello, Babu. Good to see that, Anmol. Yeah, the email, those just went out today. Let's see. Good morning. Hi, Pratik. All right, I see. Oh, good. There we go. I was looking for those thumbs up. Thank you so much. Okay, good. We always like to check that to make sure things are working well from that standpoint. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. First thing we're going to do today is we're going to go to menti.com, because now, if you've been with one of us, or if you've been with us in one of our workshops before, then you're probably already familiar with Menti. But for this workshop, instead of us doing just a swag quiz at the end, we're actually going to use Menti throughout the whole thing today. So let me go ahead and pop over to Menti. Let's get you the screen so you can see the code. So either scan the QR code with your phone or go to menti.com, and the code is down there at the bottom, 37213905. There is no software today, Ian. This is going to be pretty much us with lecture and you doing questions. So really, you're going to be in the Menti. And if you would, once you get in the Menti, give us a thumbs up. Let us know you're in there. And we'll see these showing up down here in the corner. I'll put this back up for you. And we'll take a look at the stream. Just make sure we're going well. Okay. Yeah, Ian, we will definitely address some of those questions. Cassandra, just so you know, is there's NoSQL database. That's so for the Cassandra certification, right? You will totally learn about what Cassandra is, but it is the NoSQL distributed database that we are talking about for the cert. Okay, and I see some thumbs up coming in. I see a heart. Thank you for the heart. You can give a heart too if you want. All right. Now again, let's see, we have like 60 something of you in here. So I'm just looking for a couple more of those. Yeah, oh, I see some of the thumbs up changed to hearts. It's very sweet of you.
Yep.
We appreciate that. Let me go ahead and we'll put the screen back up so you can either go to menti.com. Let me put the code in for you. Menti.com. It's 37213905. There's that. There you go. Or again, use that QR code. Oh, Ian, when I say Menti code, so the system that we're going to use today for you to do all the questions and everything is going to be in Menti. So notice the link I just dropped, that menti.com, and there's that code with the numbers down here, 37213905. This is the code I'm talking about. So when you go to menti.com, then it'll ask you for a code. You put that code in, it'll bring you to the Menti. All right, while we're just waiting. Okay, I'll give it just another minute for everyone to get into the Menti. Babu asks, how many weeks on average will it take to prepare for the certification? So it really depends on where you're starting at in your learning path. If you're absolutely new to Cassandra compared to if you've had some time. So I'm just going to make a base assumption that we're talking that you're absolutely new. I would say that it's probably going to take a couple weeks, at least, right? David, I know you might want to pipe in there to go through the Academy courses and go through all the materials and get comfortable with it. I would say a couple weeks, definitely. I don't know, David, what do you think?
Yeah, when we walk people through the Academy courses, and it takes 2 courses to prepare for the dev exam and 2 courses to prepare for the admin exam. So one overlaps, so you get double duty out of that. It takes about 3 to 5 weeks, depending on how much time you want to spend doing the self-paced assignments. That's really the deciding factor.
That is the deciding factor, right? If you don't do those and you stick with the videos and the quizzes, a couple weeks. But if you really get into it, especially on the admin side, it would definitely take a little bit more time. And in SM, I see any coding, programming, or activity today. No, we're not going to happen is we're going to explain the process of how you go through to go through the process of getting your certification, taking the exams, all the resources you need. We're going to go through a whole set of practice questions. We're going to have 20 practice questions. They are not taken out of the exam. Otherwise, it'd be kind of, a little bit of cheating there. But they are every bit as true to the kind of questions that you can expect to get in the real exams. And the whole point of this today is to help prepare you just to figure out a little bit more about you all. First one is, how much experience do you have with Apache Cassandra? Oh, you can, that's a great question. You should be able to, SM, attend this mobile. You can do Menti mobile, and you can watch this on YouTube mobile. So that'll be kind of an interesting test case. You want to let us know how it goes. All right. So it looks like the vast majority of folks have never used it before. Now, and that's fine. That's exactly why we do these. Now, we will ask you questions. Don't be shy, right? For some of the questions, we may have to defer you a little bit to either some of the resources we're going to give you or to one of the other workshops, because for the time that we have, we do have to kind of go at a pretty good clip. But ask your questions. We totally understand that many of you are not very familiar with Cassandra, right? So some of these, you may not know the answer. Just go ahead and give an answer. You're not being, we're quizzing you here, but it's not being like really quizzed. You're not being really tested today. This is just for practice. So you're totally safe with answering whatever. All right, so you've been to any of our workshops before. I know I see some of our regulars that are here today. Recognize SM. Let's see. Oh, we have a bunch of folks who've been to a workshop before. Wow. Look at that. This is totally flipped. I've never seen this before. Usually we have a lot of new folks, and mostly folks, a handful that have been to our workshops before. I've never seen this. Well, hello everybody who's been to one of our workshops. Thank you for coming back, and welcome to the new folks. And then what motivates you to get certified? While everyone's answering this one, I can definitely say that if you get a certification, a Cassandra certification, that is totally something to put on your resume. Right now, if anything, we see more and more companies, like Cassandra's pretty widely adopted. Something like 90% of the Fortune 100 companies are all using Cassandra. Things that if you pull up your phone, I guarantee you have at least one app, someone's using Cassandra. Spotify, Apple Series, Sony PlayStation, McDonald's is in there, Starbucks is in there, Home Depot, Lowe's, a bunch of the banks. It just goes on and on and on. The key thing though, and why I'm kind of mentioning this, is because one of the things that we hear over and over and over is that many companies, they have adopted Cassandra, but they would adopt it more. They just need more people who actually know how to work with Cassandra. So there's kind of a shortage of professionals and experts on Cassandra. So this is a really good way to help get your foot in the door potentially for a job or something like that. And SM, do we have to pay for the certification? Now I'm going to talk about all this. That's where the vouchers come in. So let me get through some of the material. We're going to talk to all of that. So for any of you who have questions about the vouchers, and thank you for asking that, SM, about the vouchers or about how that's going to work, we're going to get into that here in a moment. All right, awesome. Thank you for answering those questions. So what I'd like you to do now, leave your Menti open, because we're going to do all the practice questions and stuff with the Menti, right? So we're going to come back to this, so definitely leave that open. All right. All right, now the first thing I'd like to do is drop all of you the GitHub repo that we're going to work out of. Now, since so many of you have been with us before, here's the repo. You're used to most likely, there we go. You're used to most likely, you know, where we do some lecture and then we get into some exercises and everything. It's a little bit different here. This repo is really more for information. So this is, if you have questions as we're going through the material, like, you know, on the vouchers or like, what's the process for the exam? We're going to talk about all that, but all that information is also in the repo. So every link, everything you might need, even the practice questions, by the way, are also in the repo. So this is just kind of a resource for you to use. That way, later on, if we're not doing the session, you're like, oh, I don't remember what they said here. Go to the repo. The repo will have your answer. SM, is the certification real? Like, we'll get, it's a yes. If you pass your certification exam, this is a real Cassandra certification that is accepted out in the world as being, yes, you are either developer or admin Cassandra certified. So can it help you get better jobs? It can totally help you get your foot in the door, right? You know, if you go, I'm obviously I can't speak for the companies that are hiring, but I know if I was looking for Cassandra professionals and I saw somebody had that certification, then yes, I would look at them a little bit, you know, I would definitely put a little focus on that person, knowing that they've gone through that and they've passed their certification. Okay. All right. So let's get into the agenda. So the first thing I'm going to do very quickly is we're just going to go over what certifications are available and what resources you have for those certifications. And then we're just going to briefly go over the steps. The steps aren't really that bad. Again, the steps are all lined out in the repo that I just gave you. So again, if you miss something from the slides or whatever like that, you can just go to the repo and check it out. Then once we do that, we're going to actually get into the practice questions. The majority of what we're going to do today is go through each of the sections with practice questions. Now you're going to find that there are two different types of certification exam for Cassandra. There's the developer and admin, and there's crossover between them. So the DS-201, the foundation piece, is relevant to both. If you're going to take the development side or the admin side, you're going to need those regardless. Once you get into 210, the admin, that's more specific to the admin, and 220 with data modeling is actually more specific to the developer certification. I would say, though, across the board, we only have a handful of the 210 and 220. The majority of what we're going to do today is in the foundation, which both need, right? So I would go through all of them with us today, and then we'll finish up with just a couple extra resources. Yeah, and SM, what do we need to enter the exam? I'm going to talk about all that right now. Let's see. Harsh, is there any expiration of the certificate? No, the certificate itself, if you pass the exam and you get your certificate, that does not expire, right? The only thing that might come into play is Cassandra 4 is getting released this year, and there's going to be a new certification for that, but that will not invalidate this certification. So once you get this, it doesn't expire or anything like that.
Right, and David, the certification will say Cassandra 3 or in the future Cassandra 4, et cetera, but it doesn't actually expire.
That's right. Okay, so let's take a look at which certification should you get, right? As I mentioned, there's two. There's the administrator certification, and then there's the developer certification. What's the difference? Here's what it boils down to. If you're planning to operate, maintain, install, or run a Cassandra cluster, the administrator one is probably for you. If you are planning to use Cassandra, maybe you're an application developer and you're going to use Cassandra in the back end, or you're a data architect, or you're, a designer or something like that, but you're not really planning to run the cluster of the database. You're not planning to operate it and install it, but you're planning to use it. The developer certification is most likely for you. Now, is there anything limiting you from doing both? No. It depends on your time. It depends on your interests. It depends on your particular needs. So you can do one, you can do both, totally up to you. But again, admin is really for those people who are looking to run and operate Cassandra. The developer one is for mostly application developers and folks looking to use Cassandra. So what resources do you have? There's actually a ton here. Matter of fact, Constantine asked the question, are certifications hierarchized? Or, for example, should I pass developer before administrator? No. Each one is standalone. You can do them in any order. Totally up to you. Yeah. So from a resources standpoint, there's a whole set of resources here. The link at the top, that datastacks.com/dev/certifications. Really, that's kind of a one-stop shop. That's going to list out, if you go there, that's going to list out all the various things. It's similar to what's going on in the repo that we dropped. It's through the datastacks.com site. And that will bring you to all the resources that you need, right? So if anything, that's actually a really good place to start, is /dev/certifications. The GitHub repo you see there on the bottom left is the repo we're working out of today. And then finally on the bottom right there, you see that academy.datastacks.com. We should just go ahead and drop that link. Academy.datastacks.com. I'll go ahead and drop that. The Cassandra certification isn't, that's a separate one. David, I don't know if you want to talk to that one at all. But that's not the focus that we're working on today. David, is there anything though that you want to talk about with Cassandra?
Yeah, and Bhaskar, about the Cassandra certification, we do have a recorded workshop like this one on the Cassandra certification. So if you search on the DataStax developers YouTube site, you'll find that workshop where we go over the same idea, but focused on that special certification.
Yeah, and Pratik, what's the cutoff score to clear the exam? 70%. You need to pass it with 70%. You're going to find that the questions, the way we do things today, is geared for that same 70%. We're going to kind of test you there. Okay. And then on the left-hand side here, if you've got questions regarding your own Cassandra installations or follow-up, you're going through Academy and you're like, hey, I'm running into something or I don't understand something, community.datastacks.com is like Stack Overflow for Cassandra. That's a great place to go ask your questions, especially questions that are dealing with like, hey, I've got this data modeling exercise, or hey, I'm working on my cluster here, because that's a really great place for like long form questions. On the right-hand side, if you're not there already, and so many of you have been with us before, then you're probably aware of the Discord channel. We really suggest to take a look at the Discord channel. The reason why is because once we're done with the session, the YouTube chat stops, but the Discord does not, right? So if you've got those follow-up questions or whatever, then the Discord channel is a really great place to go and look at that. By the way, these links and everything, the slides themselves are actually in the repo. You'll find them in the slides, and you'll find these links in the repo as well. So no one's expecting you to like have to take screenshots or something like that. Okay, so the steps. So the first thing here, as I mentioned, is datastacks.com/dev/certifications. You really want to read through the material there and get yourself familiar with what to expect, especially in the exam rules in the process section. I'm going to show that to you here in a moment, but it's really important that you understand up front what is expected of you. The exams are, in fact, proctored. You can take them at any time, 24/7, but when you go to take your exam, somebody is actually going to be online with you, watching you, and everything, right? And there are a whole list of items that you need to be aware of. Things like you can't have a second monitor. You can't have your phone handy where you can see it. You can't be talking to other people while you're taking the exam. You cannot get up from your desk or wherever you're taking the exam, right? So those are things that are really good to know up front, and they're all covered in the exam rules and process section. One thing I'm definitely going to point out, make sure you go to the bathroom before you take your exam, because you cannot get up from your desk. I learned that the hard way. So you don't want to do that. Don't repeat my mistake. But yeah, the key thing here is just to make sure that you do take a look at the site, and in particular, the exam rules and process before you take your exam, so there's no surprises. Then choose a learning path. Like we said before, you can choose either administrator or developer. You can do both. It's totally up to you, your particular needs and your time. These learning paths, by the way, are in Academy. I'm going to show you Academy, and everything that we're going to present to you today, all the resources, everything is free, right? So all the learning materials, everything is completely free. You don't have to worry about like going through a paywall or anything like that. So I'll show you how to get to one of these learning paths in Academy here in a minute. And then if you haven't done it already, go to DataStax Academy, sign up. Again, it's free. And then you'll be given all of the resources and material. And there's more in there than just the courses that cover the exams, so you can spend all sorts of time. There's all sorts of videos and VMs if you want to go through the material like that. quizzes you could take, all that kind of thing. Now, some of you have been asking about certifications. There's actually a couple different vouchers. There's a couple different ways to get vouchers. It's up to you and how you want to do it. One way to get your voucher, and the voucher, I should just point out what those are, right? So as part of today, and if you go through the learning paths, you can get yourself a voucher that will give you 2 free attempts at the certification exams. The exams cost $145 per attempt, but with these vouchers, you'll get 2 free attempts, right? So it's important that you get your voucher. Now, one way you can get it today is if you're with us to the end of the session, we will drop a form at the end. You fill out the form, and then with that, you use the same email that you registered for today and stuff, and you can get a voucher that way. Another way you can get a voucher is you finish one of the learning paths in Academy. Once you complete the learning path, you'll see it checks your progress and everything like that. Once you complete one of those, then you send an email, and this is in the repo, it's in the information. You send an email to academy@datastacks.com, let them know that you finished one of the learning paths, and then you can get a voucher that way. So there's multiple ways for you to get a voucher. Something else about the voucher you should know. Again, you get 2 attempts, but you need to use up those attempts before getting another voucher. And you're limited to a max total of 2 vouchers. That actually gives you 4 attempts. Right? So you'll get, today, we'll give you the ways to get a single voucher. That means you get 2 attempts. And that means you could take one exam, pass it, wonderful. Now you have another one left, another attempt that you can use for the other exam. Or let's say that maybe you don't pass the first one. Well, now you have another attempt, right? But you must use those up before you can get another voucher. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. See, and I see David, you're in there answering questions. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, the other thing about that is the vouchers expire after 30 days. So don't request one until you're close to being ready to take the exam.
Yeah. Once you're ready, then that's right. Okay, and like I said, so to get your exam voucher, either 1, we'll drop a form at the end of today, or 2, complete one of the learning paths, and then email academy@datastacks.com. Another way you can do it actually is, for those of you who've been with us before, you'll find in the form that it'll ask you for a cluster ID. So if you go and create a database in Astra, which is DataStax's serverless Cassandra as a service platform, so you can just spin up a Cassandra cluster up in the cloud in a couple minutes. You'll get a cluster ID. The form actually explains how to do this. You can go to a workshop like that one, or if you've already got a database, you just paste in that cluster ID and you enter that in the form. You can get a voucher that way as well. Okay. And then finally, once you've done that, right? So once you've gone through, read the rules, understand what's expected of you from the exam process, you've gone through, we highly suggest you, unless you are already a Cassandra veteran, you really need to go through the training materials, right? All the stuff that you need to know is going to be in the training materials. Go through those training materials, get comfortable, make sure you can take the quizzes and you're comfortable with the quizzes and the material. Once you've done that, you've got your voucher, then you're ready to go and take your certification. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at what this process looks like. So I'm going to go over to Academy. So I just want you to notice where I'm at. I'm at academy.datastacks.com. I will go ahead and drop this again for everybody. Drop it a bunch of times so you have it. Yeah, matter of fact, and I should point this out too, the vouchers are processed every week, okay? So once you submit for your voucher, don't expect that it's just going to show up right away, right? We usually process them on Fridays, and we have to go through everybody in the list and process them all. So I think some of you are noticing that you just got some today. That's because we processed them earlier this morning. Okay, so once you go into Academy, now I've already logged in, but once you go to Academy and you've registered and everything, you're going to see a page that looks something like what you see here. And in the bottom, you're going to see this catalog of all these different courses and such that are in here. Again, these are all free, right? So you can take any of them that you'd like. What I want to point out, though, is notice the admin course and the developer, or learning paths, I should say. So depending on which one you're choosing, then you're going to pick a learning path. Now, if you click on this, the learning path is actually a set of courses, right? So My box is kind of laggy today, so don't mind that. So you'll notice that there's a set of courses in here: DS101, DS201, DS220 for the developer one. And I'll blow this up just a little bit, make it easier to read, hopefully. So you just say enroll, and you can, go to any one of these, and as you complete the content and everything like that, you'll see it'll start to complete. And what you want to do is there'll be a set of videos and quizzes in each of these, right? So you're going to start looking at the video, go through the video, take the quiz, so on and so forth. And you want to make sure, I believe you can't complete them until you score 100 on all of them, actually. So you want to get really, really comfortable with this process. And as you go through and do this, then what'll happen is your learning path will automatically get completed. So once you've completed these, all of these, then these will be checked off, and you'll see that they're done. And that's the part that I'm talking about, that once you've completed a learning path, then you can send the email to academy@datastacks.com, say, hey, I used this email, I completed this learning path, and you can get your voucher. That's, like I said, another way to do it. Even if you don't use that mechanism to get your voucher, for each of the paths, you really want to complete these before you take your exam, right? Yes, you get 2 attempts. Yes, that's part of the voucher, and yes, those are 2 free attempts. But like I said, at some point, you're going to max out in how many of those you can get. You can only get 2 vouchers. So you really want to make sure that you're prepared, because you don't want to run into a case where you're not getting through it. Because then at some point, if you go through all 4 of them, then you're going to have to start paying. So just make sure you're prepared up front. Okay, so let's say then you've completed your learning path. You feel comfortable, and you're like, okay, I've got this. I'm ready to take my exam. What do? Notice down here that there is this, I went too far. There is this DataStax certification course. Click on that. This is going to bring you to the medal system. That's what this, when you go to log in here, it's going to, the test taking system. Also, there's the exam rules here that I talked about a minute ago. So you're going to want to go through these. Now, as I mentioned with the exam rules, we're not going to read through them all today. But again, some things to point out: a live proctor will watch you through the whole exam. It's a closed book exam. There's all sorts of things that you need to know ahead of time before you take your exam. There's also a little widget here. In order for you to even take your exam, you actually have to enable this. What this is going to do, if like you use Chrome or whatever, you have to install a Chrome extension, and then it's actually going to check. It's going to check, do you have a second monitor? Like, it's going to tell you, like, hey, are you good or not to move forward? So you have to go through this process in order to be even able to take the test in the first place. And I'll show you in a second, when you get to the spot where you actually take the test, you'll have to do this before you can get the button to even show up to take the test. They just provide extra links for you to do it here if you want. So I'm suggesting just do these right off the bat. And that way, when you go to take your test, you're all set to go. How are we doing on questions, David? Oh, we lost the Skype? We did. All right. Well, let me make sure to get David back in here. I don't know what happened to Skype. It dropped. So get me just a second to get David back. I appreciate all of your patience. Okay. All right, we're getting David back here in just a moment. And I see Alex is all over the questions. Thank you, Alex, for that. Okay, great. All right, just bear with me, everybody. I'm just making sure we can get David back here. Okay, he said he's going to be back soon. So I will just go ahead and continue on, and David should pop back in. Okay, so here's what I wanted to show you next. So once you either log in or sign up, I've already signed up, right? So I've just logged in. But once you do this, let's bring you to the medal system. And you're going to see this certification.medal.com, right? This is an external provider that provides the test taking software, the proctors, and all of that, right? Like I said, it's 24/7. You can come in here and take the test anytime you want. That's totally up to you. You don't have to schedule it ahead of time or anything. It's at your schedule, but you will be proctored live. Now, what I'd like to point out, though, is a couple things here. Notice that you find out how many questions you have and how much time you have. You have 90 minutes total for the whole exam and 60 questions. You can take as much time as you want for an individual question, but you have 90 minutes total. Now, you're going to find that when we do the practice questions here, we're only giving you like a minute and a half per. That's because we have to get through so many in a certain time. But when you take the actual exam, you're not going to have that particular limitation, right? But it will tell you, again, how much time you have total and how many questions and everything. Notice this little widget here. In order for this button to, for you to be able to do this, this is that widget that's actually going to check for a second monitor and all of that kind of thing. And then finally, and this is really, really important, you see this little price tag here. It says make payment. That might be scary. You're like, wait a minute, I thought I got a voucher. Why do I have to make a payment? Check it out. When you click on the button and you say make payment, it's going to give you a spot right here for have a coupon code. That's where you enter your voucher. Once you enter in your voucher successfully, that payment will go away, and that's where you'll get your 2 attempts. So again, you do in fact click on the little tag for the $145, and you do say make payment. You're not paying anything. You put in your coupon code there. That's the voucher. And then that's it, right? So you take your test, you go through, and we'll see what happens from that standpoint. All righty. All right, let's see what's going on with Dave here. All right, while we're waiting for David, I'm going to go ahead and start some of our very peaceful music. And let me see how David is doing. If not, I'll just start going through some of the questions myself. Oh, I feel like I hear David. Are you back?
I am back.
All right, we got David back. Woo! All right, cool. Great, good timing, because I was just about to start into the questions. All right, so here, let's go ahead and get some of the questions. Matthias, my bad. The exam is with Python, Java, or CQL. CQL. There's no coding or anything like that. Even the developer one, you're going to go through CQL and data modeling. We're actually going to give you those practice. You're going to see the practice questions right now. So after we're done today, you should have a really good idea of what to expect from that standpoint. Oh, I'm sorry, Cedric's not here, SM. I'm sorry. Let's see. Babu, will completing the learning path be enough to be prepared for taking the exam? Yes. All of the material that you will experience in the learning path is going to be enough to actually take the exam. And I'm glad you asked that question, because you'll find, and matter of fact, let me just show this to you real quick, and then we'll get into the questions and start moving. So when you go to the learning paths, if you go to some of the courses, like if I go to DS201 here. Now, if I did nothing but take the videos and the quizzes, could I use that information to pass the exam? Yes. However, I want you to notice over here, for those of you now, I want to be very clear about this. If you're not familiar with VMs, a VM, a virtual machine, I think this thing's like 3.2 gigs, right? It takes a lot of resources on your machine. You need to have something like Oracle VirtualBox installed. But what this does, this will give you a fully configured environment that will bring you through exercises that go through all the material. So if you really want to dig in and learn and really, really help solidify the stuff, the VMs are a good way to go. Now, admittedly, though, not everybody's going to be able to run them. Like I said, Oracle VirtualBox takes, a good amount of RAM. The VM's going to take some. It's 3.2 gigs, depending on your connection. That might take forever to download, or maybe not. Totally up to you, right? But just know that this it's separate from going through the material in the videos and then just taking the quizzes. This will actually have you do the things that you're learning about. All right. So David, what do you think we get into some questions?
Sounds like a good idea.
Right. So what we want to do is we want to come back to your Menti. So let's take a look at this first one. So go back to your Menti. And I just noticed that, here we go. All right, so let me get the Menti up as well. So if you missed it, let me go ahead and bring the code up for you. There we go. Let me pull something back onto my screen. My bad. There we go. Here's the code. If you weren't in the Menti for some reason, I'm going to go in there with you, actually. And let's put that code in, 37213905. Okay. So, what's going to happen is we're going to go to a question. I'm going to say start quiz, right? I'll let everybody get in here. And so you want to look at the screen. I'm going to put up a question like this. So number 1, CQL, developer and administrator exams. I'll read it. And then what will happen is I will go ahead and start the quiz like I'm doing now. And you should see a countdown. And there it goes. And then, like I said, you'll have about a minute and a half to answer. That's just for now because we have to get through the questions. So let's do this first one. So you want to consider the CQL statements you see here. Create table, roller coasters, and this, and all of these statements. And how many rows will the roller coasters table have after executing all of the CQL statements? This is going to give you kind of a feel for how these work. Oh, SM, this is not the actual exam. Don't worry. These are just practice questions, right? This is just for practice to give you a feel for how these actually work. Yeah, this is not the exact... We wouldn't just, like, throw that at you. That'd be, like, really evil. And go!
And the goal here is to show you how we ask questions.
Yep.
You know, so there are no surprises.
Yeah.
Every form of question that will be on the real exam is on the practice exam.
That's right. That's right. So again, for those of you brand new to Cassandra, if you have no clue, just think about it for a moment, see if you can figure it out, give an answer. It's no big deal. We're going to explain all of these, right? So we're going to go through and start explaining them, but yeah, it's going to give you a feel for how these work. Okay, looks like our answers are in, and it looks like the majority of you got that correct, right? So it is C. The correct answer is C. So let's find out why. Go for it, David.
Yeah, so as we look at this, in all of these questions, we're going to look at the CQL statements. Here we're defining a table. And if you'll look, the table, the first thing I'm going to look at in that table is the primary key. There's a single field for that primary key called name. And now I'm going to look at the inserts. There are 4 inserts. The first insert inserts the roller coaster Millennium Force at Cedar Point. The second one, Formula Rossa at Ferrari World. The third, Steel Dragon 2000 at Nagashima Spa Land. And the fourth one, Millennium Force at Cedar Point with a different rating. So the question is, how many rows will there be in the roller coasters table after executing all of these CQL statements? So the first one inserts Millennium Force, the second one inserts Formula Rossa, the third one inserts Steel Dragon, and the fourth one is crucial. You'll notice that the primary key, as we said, is name, and the fourth one uses the same name field as the first insert. And what happens in Cassandra when that occurs is, unlike a relational database, you don't get an error. What happens is we call it an upsert. It actually updates that first row, the one with the primary key of Millennium Force. So finally, that first row will be Millennium Force Cedar Point 7, but only 3 rows get inserted into the table. One gets updated by that upsert. So only 3 rows. The correct answer then is C.
Alrighty, wonderful. All right, so we'll go into the next one. So again, hopefully this will give you an idea of how this is going to kind of feel. So I'm going to give you the question, and I will go ahead and start that there. And we want to consider these CQL statements. Again, we have a create table and then a set of insert statements. And what is the result of executing all of the CQL statements?
Oh, SM will display the leaderboard, but not after every question.
Yeah, SM, unlike our other quizzes, this isn't like a swag quiz or anything like that. And the leaderboards are really there just to give you a tally of your points. Because we mentioned in the real exam, you need 70% to pass. We have 20 questions here today, so you need 14 to pass, right? So we're just giving you a gut check. That's all the leaderboards are doing here today, so you're not really going to be compared. Time doesn't matter in this case, such like that, so... Alrighty, looks like our answers are in. And the correct answer here was D. Again, don't worry about there's a spread of folks there. We'll go ahead and explain it as well. Go for it, Dave.
Yeah, so let's take a look. We're looking again at a create table statement, and the first place I'm going to look is the primary key. The primary key consists of artist and title, and you'll notice those are both within the double parentheses. So artist and title are the primary key. They also make up the partition key, and that's crucially important. So we look at the four inserts. The question is, what's the result? The first insert, the Beatles and Yesterday, make up the partition key. The second insert, the Beatles and Let It Be. The third insert, ABBA and Fernando. And the fourth insert, Frank Sinatra and Yesterday. Each of those is a unique combination of our artist and title. Each of those is a unique partition key. So the answer is a table with 4 partitions.
And by the way, yes, I did notice a couple of people are answering in the chat. Don't answer in the chats, please. Answer in Menti. So make sure that you're in Menti, not the chat. All right, great. Let's go on to question 3. So this is question 3. Go ahead and start that there. We should see a countdown going here real soon. Yep, there we go. Okay, so we want to consider the SQL statement. We see here, again, it's a create table statement. And then which of the following is a valid query for the cars table?
And Melinda, I see you have a question. What are partitions? Partitions are just a core part of the way Cassandra works. So as you work through the learning path, the DS201 class that we talked about, you'll get very quickly into partitions. Very important concept.
All right, looks like our results are in. And the correct answer here was C. So let's see why that is. Sorry, stupid dad jokes. Yeah, right?
Yep. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this one. The answers, there's a pretty widespread of answers here. So if once again, we're going to look at this table definition, and I'm going to look again at the primary key. Notice now the primary key, there are 4 fields, make, model, year, and color. And the 2 fields, make and model, are in the interior parentheses. Those 2 fields are the portion of the primary key we call the partition key. And year and color that follow are what we call clustering columns, and that's going to be crucially important. So the question is, which of the following is a valid query? So only one of them would be a valid query. The first one, select from cars where make equals Ford. The query pattern that we're going to prefer in Cassandra, that we're going to almost always use, is that a query stays within a single partition or a small number of partitions. So in order to make a valid query, we have to specify the partition. Well, the partition is the make and model. So specifying only the make is not sufficient. The second one, years 1969, colors red, those are the clustering columns. We have to specify the partition. That's a requirement. So that one, we rule out B. C and D both specify make and model, Ford and Mustang. So one of those, or excuse me, both of those could be valid, but only one is, because we said which of the following. And if we look, D specifies the clustering column color. But color is there are two clustering columns, year and color. Color is the last or rightmost clustering column. And the rule is, if you specify or constrain any clustering column, you have to start with the first or leftmost. So it would be okay to say where make is Ford, model Mustang, year 1969, and color red, but not just color red. So C is correct because it has the partition key, Ford and Mustang, and constrains only or specifies only the first or leftmost clustering column, year. So the correct answer is C.
Cool. Okay, so now you should notice, you probably notice a score on your Menti. Now, again, the key thing here is, since there's no time-based or anything, notice that a bunch of people have the same score. So the leaderboard's not really meant in this case to be a comparison against each of you. It's really to get a gut check of where you're at. We've had 3 questions. Each question is worth 1,000 points here. So you have, if you've gotten them all right, you have 3,000, right? So by the end, we'll have 20 of those. And if you get 14 or above, that's at 70%. So again, it's just a gut check to give you kind of a feel of where maybe you are at. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to question number 4, where question 4. There we go. All right, so you want to consider these CQL statements. Again, I have multiple create table statements in this case, and now a batch. That's interesting. And then what is a valid statement about this batch? All right, looks like the results are coming in. And the correct answer here was, in fact, C. You know, I'll tell you, for so many of you being brand new to Cassandra, right, I'm glad to see there's a majority getting these right. Again, if you're not, it's okay. These are practice. This is just to give you a feel, right, of what to expect. All right, David, what's going on with this one? Oh, go ahead.
I was noticing that as well. One thing to notice in this particular example, something that's very much Cassandra-like, but not, you won't see in relational world. You have two tables here with the same data in them. They have the ID, name, department, and the ID, name, and department in both of them, but the primary key is configured differently to support different queries. That's actually common. It's a form of denormalization that we do in Cassandra. So the question is, what about this batch? We do two inserts, and we're inserting exactly the same data, AC1123, Joe, and legal into both tables. The question then is, which of these four statements applies? Well, it's two different tables. That's two different partitions. So right away, I believe it's a multi-partition batch. I'm going to rule out A and B. And the question then is, can it be applied? Well, you might ask, what would prevent it from being applied? Well, it wouldn't be applied if we omitted one of the fields from the primary key. That would prevent it from being applied. But all the fields of the primary key for both tables, first table is just ID, the second is department and ID. All the fields are provided. Therefore, it's a multi-partition batch and it can be applied. And the majority of you got the correct answer, C.
Awesome. All right, moving on to question 5. Go ahead and start that question up. There we go. Okay, so we want to consider the table definition with a primary key omitted. Notice it's not there. And you're going to want to read these bullets. These are the known things, right? Known things about this. And what primary key does this table have? So you need to figure out the primary key. Oh, Gordon, if Menti crashes, just reload it. Yeah, just refresh it. It should come back. If it doesn't, let me know. That'll be an interesting one. And forget, don't put the answers in the chat. Make sure you do them in Menti, please. All right, looks like our answers are in. Let's go ahead and take a look. The correct answer here is, in fact, B.
Wow.
Everyone did really well on that one. Let's go and take a look at why.
Yeah, this is a different sort of question because in all the others I've said, let's look at the create table, and right away we look at the primary key definition. In this case, we haven't defined the primary key, but we've given you some statements. We've said it's known that restaurants are uniquely identified by a combination of name, city, reviewer. That tells me right away that the primary key consists of name, city, and reviewer, because the primary key uniquely identifies a row just like it does in a relational database. Then we said the restaurant reviews are retrieved from the table using a combination of name and city. Well, that tells me that since my queries are going to be based on name and city, that one of two things is happening here. Either name is the partition key and city is the first clustering column, or city is the partition key and name is the first clustering column, or name and city are together, together make up the partition key. And the only one that fits that criterion is B, where name and city make up the partition key. The third statement, the third thing that is known, is that the table has multi-row partitions. What that tells me is that there must be a clustering column And since the primary key is at least contains name, city, and reviewer, reviewer can be a clustering column, and B fits the criteria. Just to note, it would be possible to create another primary key that meets these requirements, but the only valid choice among A, B, C, and D is B.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, David. Moving on to question 6. Go ahead and start that there. All right. So you want to consider the table definition here and the CQL query. Now, this is one of those that if you get this one wrong, once you learn the way to do this, you'll never get it wrong again. But which materialized view definition can be used to support the query? I'm not going to say this is a trick question. It's not, but I think that'll make sense once you see what the answer is. Okay, let's see. Results are in. Let's take a look. The correct answer here was D. A little bit of a spread on that one. And like I said, if you got this one wrong, you'll never get it wrong again.
Yeah, David's right here. There's something that you just need to know on this one. So we have this table. It has a primary key of name, but we want to do a query where we want to query with the where clause, we want to specify wins. The rule is that queries have to include the partition key, and wins is not the partition key. It's not even part of the partition key. So that query, select from teams by wins where wins equals 4, we simply, we can't do that from our teams table, so we need to create a materialized view, teams by wins. So what I know is that wins needs to be the partition key, because that's the only field that I'm querying on. So that rules out A and C right away, and the correct choice would be B or D. Name is the clustering column in both of those materialized views, so that would return multiple rows, all the teams with a certain number of wins. That's what I want. And what you have to know is that since we're essentially creating a materialized view, you can think of it as being another table. None of the fields of the primary key can be null. So creating the materialized view requires us to do a null check on the fields that will be part of the primary key, because they don't have to be non-null in the original teams table, because they're not in the primary key there. So D is the correct answer. We have to do the null check. And as David said, once you remember that, and it makes sense because primary key fields can't be null, once you remember that, you'll get this one right. You'll remember it every time, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Once you realize, okay, yeah, I can't have nulls there, then okay. Makes that one pretty easy. All right, so notice the leaderboard again. This is to compare each other. This is just more to see where you're at, right? So we've had 6 questions up to this point, so you could have a total of 6,000 points. Again, it's just a gut check. So let's move on to the next one. Moving on to question 7. Question 7, we'll go ahead and start that one up. There we go. All right, so let's consider the table definition and the CQL query. This is another one of those similar to the last one. That you'll never get this wrong again if you get it wrong today. Which secondary index can be used to support the query? Okay, answers are in. Let's see how this one turned out. Yeah, this one's kind of a spread, but that's okay. You're going to learn why here in just a moment.
All right, so let's take a look at this one. Once again, we're going to look at the primary key of the original table, restaurants by city. Primary key is city and name. City is the partition key. Name's the clustering column. We can't do the query shown below as is because we're specifying the city. That's the partition key. That's good. But cuisine is not a clustering column. So we need to resolve that. And when you look at these, the A is the correct answer. And as David said, this is one that once you know, you know. And that's because you can picture creating a secondary index almost like creating a magic clustering column, adding a special clustering column. And you can only specify one column. So the first one specifies cuisine as that column. That's the only one that can be correct. And you can now do a query based on the partition key, which is the same. It's still a city. And you can do it based on this new magic clustering column, as I called it, or secondary index, and that is cuisine. So A is the only correct choice. And this one was kind of obvious because you can only build a secondary index on a single column. So that ruled out B, C, and D pretty quickly.
Okay, moving on to question 8. Go ahead and start that. All right, so which statement describes the where clause in a query? All right, answers are in. That one came through pretty fast. Correct answer there was, in fact, A. Let's take a look at why.
Okay, and the reason is, you want to take a close look at the wording here. The answers say where clauses must reference. Where clauses certainly can reference all of these, but they must reference the primary key. There's a discussion going on in the chat right now about the previous question, and that question was, can we do a search just on the secondary index? The answer is no. You do need to specify the partition key, which in that with the secondary index, the partition key is still the same partition key. The secondary index just sort of adds a special clustering column. So you do need to search based on at least the fields of the partition key, or you end up having to query the entire database, which could be hundreds or even thousands of nodes.
All right. That's right. I did goof. All right, question 9. Let's consider these CQL statements. These two tables and this type. Notice the type. And which insert statement can be used to insert a row in the people table?
SM, I am on Discord, but I'm not on Discord right now. I'm watching too many things on my screen to keep track of all of them.
All right, answers are in. Let's take a look. The correct answer here was A. This really comes down to a formatting issue, doesn't it?
Yeah, so just a note, some of these questions require you to take a look and think about what happens when something runs or how you might make something work. Others test your understanding of the syntax and so on. That's what this question is. We have a user-defined type called name, and we have a table called people that uses name. And the real question here is, what is the syntax that we use to set the fields of a user-defined type? And this is one that, a memorization question, you kind of just have to know the syntax. And the syntax is JSON. So the A is the correct answer.
All righty, let's go ahead and look at 10. But first, we'll again look at our leaderboard, right? So let's see how everybody's doing. So we should have 9,000 if you've gotten them all correct so far. Harsh and Allen holding it up. Cool. All righty. So question 10. Go ahead and start that one. So this one's fun. This is actually one of those that will give you, once you get this right and understand this, this is definitely one of those kind of key things to know about something, how Cassandra works. You want to consider the CQL statements. We have our crate table and these statements here. Pay particular attention to that crate table statement and how things are being defined. And then what is the result of executing these CQL statements? All right, answers are in. Let's see what they look like. Well, that's a really awesome spread there. The correct answer is B.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
This one's a little tricky, and that's actually why it's tricky. But when you notice it, you'll look for this kind of stuff in the future, which is why we give you one of these practice questions.
Yeah. So if you take a look at this one, there are a couple of key things. Of course, I'm going to look at the username or the primary key, which is username and email. And then I'm going to look at the rest of the create table, and the crux of this question is that the nickname field is static. The nickname field is static. So I look at the inserts. The first insert, DC1234, David at datastacks.com, work with the nickname of Dave. The second one, DC1234, same partition. All the inserts are the same partition. So I know I only have one partition, but the emails are different. The first one was David at datastacks.com. The second was David at gmail.com. And that's a clustering column. So it tells me that I have two, that tells me that I have two rows in this partition. So right away, I'm going to rule out C and D. Then I have an update, and we're going to set the nickname to Davy, the description to school, where the username is DC1234 and the email is david at gmail.com. What it comes down to is, where does the nickname Davy get set? Because the nickname field is static, that means it has the same value for every row in the partition. So static means static or common within or shared within the partition. So even though there are two Davids on this video and neither of us go by the nickname Davy, that's correct, right, David?
What? Yeah, no, that's right. I do not go by that name.
Neither do I. Because it's static, it gets changed to Davy in both rows. So the correct answer is B. So there's kind of a lot going on there. But the key was understanding that static variables or fields have the same value within a partition.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Moving on then to question 11. I'll keep these going. Notice now, this is going to change. A lot of the questions so far have been a lot of like CQL tables. What do these look like? Now, this is going to change a little bit, where we're going to move a little bit into some of the architecture here. Okay. So you want to consider the two data centers in the diagram. And then what is a valid statement about a read request made at a consistency level of local quorum to a coordinator in coordinator node Z in Paris, DC? Okay, it looks like our results are in. This one's kind of fun, actually. And it looks like the vast majority of you got this right. That's awesome. Even for folks who'd not done Cassandra before.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with that. So in this one, the key is that the read request is made a consistency level of local quorum, meaning that a quorum of, and by quorum we mean majority, more than half of the replicas in the Paris data center need to respond. Since the replication factor is 3, the quorum is 2. In the best case, the failed replica W, or the failed node W, is not a replica of this data, and all 3 nodes that contain the data are available, so that's going to succeed for sure. The worst case is that W, the failed node, is one of the 3 replicas, but that still leaves 2 replicas on which the data resides. So a query to the Paris data center would get back an acknowledgement from the 2 remaining replicas, and it would still succeed. So either way, this query succeeds and is handled totally within the Paris data center. So the correct answer is B, and it's the local part that makes it handled within the Paris data center. And I'm impressed that so many of you who are new to Cassandra got this one right.
Yeah,
good job.
Cool. Yay. All right, moving on to question 12. Whoops. There we go. Try that again. All right, so one thing I want to point out about this one. There we go. Notice here, we show you the full block, but in your browser, when you're taking the actual exam, with the log output, you may need to scroll. You may need to see a scroll bar. So make sure that if you just notice something like that, so you can see the entire trace and you don't miss anything. So at what elapsed time is the data persisted so that it will survive an unexpected node shutdown?
And remembering that these exam questions are to prepare you for taking the exam and the formats offered on the exam, David showed you a scroll bar on the right. It's most likely on this question, if your screen's too small, you'll see a horizontal scroll bar, not a vertical scroll bar.
Oh, okay.
Given the way the exam interface works.
That's right. Yep. Thank you for that, David.
In fact, in the exam, I think the actual question says, because we have questions similar to this, says you may need to scroll horizontally. We did get some feedback about that.
Okay. Oh, so you guys updated.
We need to update the slide. Yeah.
Okay.
We updated the exam, but not the slide.
Okay. Okay, looks like the results are in. Correct answer here is C. Yes. Let's take a look at why. This is actually one of my favorite features of Cassandra. It's one of the robustness features. It's really neat, actually.
So we take a look. The question is, at what elapsed time is the data persisted so it will survive an unexpected node shutdown? If you look, we have the activities or events and the times. First thing, we execute the query at time 0, parse at 328, prepare the statement at 690, determining the replicas, which replicas will it be sent to at 1834, and appending to the commit log at 2193. The entire point of the commit log is to store data so that it will survive a node shutdown, and when a node starts up, it'll continue, read the data from the commit log, and continue to process and do what it needs to with it. So the correct answer is C. Just one note, Cassandra is, to use a phrase, wicked fast. Originally, this slide said 2193 milliseconds, and someone said, isn't that slow? It's like, yeah, it's slow.
It's micro.
And it's wrong, because Cassandra is not slow. So 2193 microseconds is the correct answer here.
Alrighty. Thank you. Moving on to question 13. Okay, so how is the replication factor configured in Cassandra? Okay, answers are in, and let's see what it comes out to. Yes, the correct answer here is B, per key space.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a spread there, but most people got this right. And if you've done this, if you've created a key space in Cassandra, what you understand is that you must configure the replication factor and strategy at the time of key space creation. In fact, if you use CQLSH and you start creating a key space, code completion will prompt you essentially to fill in replication factor and strategy. So replication factor is configured per key space.
Yeah, so something, Harsh, something to just kind of, per your comment there, I know you were asking about secondary indexes. We were actually having a conversation in the background about this, because David and I had said slightly different things there. When using a secondary index or a stored attached index, you can query outside of your partition key, right? So the key thing with that, though, is per what David was saying earlier, is that from a performance perspective, that yes, you end up having to scan through your node. So if you have a query that includes only the secondary index and you don't have a partition key, well, then it doesn't know what partition to look at. So it's got to go through all of them. So it's never going to be as performant as it would be if you had a flat out denormalized table or something like that. However, to your comment about the infamous allow filtering, yeah, don't use that. Don't do that. I mean, there are actually certain more advanced cases where you can use allow filtering responsibly, but you got to know what that is and how to use that. Otherwise, don't use them. We've seen too many cases of folks who have allow filtering all over the place in their production queries in their app and wonder why at some point Cassandra starts falling over and it's not scaling and it's not fast. That's because of allow filtering. So don't use that. If you do have a case, though, where you are trying to query outside of your primary key and a secondary index looks like that might work, you can use them. Just know that, again, it's not going to perform the same as pure denormalized tables, right? So it depends on your SLAs and what you need there. Alrighty. All right, so this leaderboard, we're at the next leaderboard here. Let's see how we're doing. All right, looks like Harsh so far is the only person with everything correct so far, and Alan right there. Again, I really shouldn't make the comparison. It's not meant for that. I'm so used to doing it in our normal workshops, right? So, all right, so. But again, it gives you just kind of a feeling for where things are. All right, so moving over to question 14. So now we'll get into some of the admin pieces. There's just a couple of these, right? So I would say stick through it because then the data modeling ones are going to be really important for those of you looking to take the developer exam. All right, let's go ahead and start this one. All right, so what are two options for internode encryption in Cassandra? Now, something I want to point out here. Notice that in the question it says choose two. Now, because of the limitations of Menti, what we're doing right now, you can only choose one. So the way we've done it is if you choose either one of the two, here you'll get it correct. In the real exam, though, if it says choose two, it means choose two. And the metal exam system will allow you to choose two. So be very careful about that, that you don't, I think it actually forces you, right, David? Like, I don't think you can choose one in that case. Well, validate out.
I don't think it forces you.
Okay, so if it says it, make sure you choose two if it says choose two. It's been a while since I've taken it, so I don't honestly remember.
Yeah.
Nice, Matthias. That's funny. All right, let's see. Let's see if answer F is on the screen. All right, the correct answers were C and E. Right, now again, in the real exam, you would have need to have chosen both C and E for that to be correct. So I want to be very clear about that.
And the other thing about this question is we will never ask you choose all the correct answers. If there's more than one, we'll tell you how many, and we actually tell you twice. We say, what are two options? Choose two. We don't want the question to be difficult because you have to guess how many options there are. We'll tell you exactly how many. Read that carefully. It says choose two, as David says, choose two. Here we're talking about encryption between nodes, and the choices that are available, the valid choices are all encrypted, all traffic between nodes, none, no traffic between nodes, DC, encrypt traffic that crosses data center boundaries between nodes, and rack. Rack is another abstraction like data center. And the idea of a rack goes back to physical data centers where you might have multiple physical racks in a data center, and you want to cross rack boundaries in case you had a failure of a common power supply in a rack or something. But the choices would be all, none, DC, and rack. Only rack and DC are in this list, so C and E are the correct choices.
Okay, moving on to question 15. Here we go. Which configuration file is used to set garbage collection properties for Cassandra? Okay, results are in. Let's take a look. And the correct answer here is B. Let's take a look at why.
Yeah, and actually A wasn't a bad guess.
Right.
Incorrect, but not a bad guess, because so much of the configuration we do for Cassandra is in the Cassandra YAML file. But JVM options is a file that was designed specifically to put JVM-specific settings in to make it easier to find them and configure things like garbage collection, memory, and other JVM settings. So the correct answer here is B, JVM options.
Yeah, and it's good to know that Cassandra is built on Java, right? So, you know, put the Java-specific stuff over in the JVM options and make that a little nicer. All right, moving on to 16. We're almost there. Almost there. So close, so close. This is another one of those questions that, once you understand how this works, will really help you understand the core of how Cassandra works. Matter of fact, David alluded to what's going on here before when we were talking about upserts and how things work in Cassandra. I was going to give a phrase that would have given the answer, but I'm not going to do that.
Yes.
But, I'll let you all struggle for a moment. So yeah, so consider the table definition and how a single row is stored in one mem table and two SS tables on a Cassandra node. What are the current values for this row? All right, answers are in. Let's see. The correct answer here was B. This is actually one of my favorite questions, actually. I really enjoy this one.
Yeah, very good. So in this one, keep in mind that Cassandra can store data for a row in multiple places. In this case, a mem table and two SS tables. And the phrase that David was waiting to use, go ahead, David, say it out loud.
Oh, yeah, last right wins.
Yeah, last right wins. And I was waiting to use it too. Last right or latest update wins. So we look at this this row. How do we know it's the same row? Because ID is the primary key, and the ID is 11 in the mem table, SS table, or in both SS tables. So we're talking about the same row. Question is, what are the current column values for this row? And we have to look at the values in all three. The score value in the mem table is 75. The score value in the SS tables are 62 and 48 respectively. And latest right wins. One of the things so we're gonna have to compare the timestamps is what it comes down to. One of the things that we'll do in the exam so as not to make it inordinately difficult is if you have to compare timestamps, we will make the timestamps differ in the first couple digits. You won't have to go out to the 10th digit to, are these two timestamps equal and which one comes first? So here I can look, the mem table is timestamped 139, the SS table, first digits 120, the other SS table 118. So clearly they're different, and clearly we can tell the order pretty quickly. So the timestamp, the newest timestamp for score is the mem table, as I would expect, 139. So the score is 75. The test, mem table doesn't have an entry for test, that's okay, but both SS tables do. And the latest timestamp for the test value is from the top SS table, timestamp of 120, and that's math. So the current values for the row, obviously the primary key is the same, 11, but the test is math and the score is 75 because latest right wins.
Okay, all right, so let's move on then to question 17. And start that one up. We're in the last set of questions here. What is a valid statement about a coordinator node handling a query at consistency level 3? right, we have our answers in. Let's take a look. Correct answer here is D. And let's hear it, David. What's going on?
Wow, very good. Seeing that so many people got that correct.
Yeah.
You sure you're all new to Cassandra? Or is
Yeah, right.
You already say you are. This is great. Well, if you take a look, the consistency level is explicitly set to 3. That was to make the question easier. More often, we'd set it to something like quorum or local quorum. But either way, what does consistency level 3 mean for a read? It means that the coordinator node must get back acknowledgments about the read data from 3 nodes. But what do those acknowledgments look like? Coordinator doesn't have to talk to all replicas. It only needs to send a request to 3. Read repairs kind of a distractor. Doesn't really fit here. The question really comes down to B and D. The coordinator node can ask all 3 replicas for the data, but what it really does is it sends a direct request for the data to one of the replicas, and sends digest requests, a request for digest of the data, to the other replicas. Well, what does the coordinator node do with that? It compares the data it received with the digests it receives from the others. And if they all 3 agree, it sends back a response to the client, and we're good. What if they don't agree? Well, remember, latest right wins. It looks at the timestamp, and it either has the latest data or one of the digests it receives is later, in which case it needs to request the latest data, and then it'll perform a read repair in the background. But again, to be highly performant, it's not going to ask for all the data from all the nodes or replicas required by the consistency level. It's going to ask for data from one node or one replica and ask for digest from the other, so we don't have to wait for 3 times the data to travel over the network. So the correct answer here, and so many of you got it correct. You sound like Cassandra experts, not newcomers. The correct answer is D.
By the way, I don't remember the name, but someone in the very, very beginning in the YouTube chat had asked a question around something like this. And I had stated that, read repair comes into play when you use something from quorum or above in your consistency level. I mean, there's a read repair chance as well. That's different. But if you're issuing a read request and you do it at quorum or above, then the process that you see here in D is going to happen regardless. And it's that digest comparison that comes into play, that if it sees that for some reason one of the replicas is stale, then it'll automatically issue the read repair, right? So I just want to tie that together to that question that we had in the very beginning. This is the very process that I'm talking about. All right, moving on to question 18. Let's go ahead and start this one. All right, so what is a valid statement about a write made at a consistency level local quorum against a key space with a replication factor of 3? Okay, answers are in. Let's go ahead and take a look. And the correct answer here is C.
Yeah,
This one helps.
once again.
Oh, go ahead, David. Sorry.
Well, once again, looks like we had the majority of folks got the correct answer here. And the correct answer is C, because the coordinator node will always try to write to all replicas. But the consistency level local quorum with a replication factor of 3 means as soon as a local quorum of replicas, which is 2 out of 3 in this case, as soon as 2 replicas acknowledge the write, the coordinator node will tell the client that the write succeeded. So we always try to write to 3, but we're only waiting for an ACK back from the number specified by the consistency level. In this case, local quorum of 3 is 2. So the correct answer here is C.
Okay. Yeah, and this is definitely one of what I was going to say a moment ago is this is one of those areas where there's a relationship between consistency level and replication factor, right? But no matter what your consistency level is, when you're writing, you're always going to write to the number of replicas you have in your replication factor, right? So there's a relationship. Your consistency level is based off replication factor. So if I have replication factor of 3, and then I have a quorum, it'll be a majority of 3. Or if I do all, it'll be all based off of that, right? So just again, there's that relationship, but when you're writing data, you're always going to write to the number of replicas in your replication factor. All right, let's go to question 19. Now, these last two are from the data modeling piece. These are totally different from all the other ones you've seen so far. So we saved those for the end, but these are kind of fun. And if you've never done anything with a Chebotko diagram or anything, no worries. We'll kind of give you a little explanation here. Let's go ahead and do this, but we'll let you struggle first because that's fun. All right, so you want to consider the Chebotko diagram that captures the physical data model for investment portfolio data. And what is the primary key and clustering order of the table trades by ASD? All right, let's see. The correct answer here is, in fact, D. Let's take a look at why.
All right, so if you look at this Chebotko diagram, this is a diagram of the physical data model. So we've got data types and clustering column orders and all of that represented here. So the primary key for trades by ASD consists of all the columns marked K and all the columns marked C. So the K columns make up the partition key, and there's only one account. And the C columns, the columns marked with C, make up the clustering columns. So the primary key consists of partition key of account, that fits A, B, C, and D. followed by symbol and trade ID, and order matters in clustering columns. And symbol comes before trade ID. So I'm going to rule out A and B because they have trade ID before symbol. Order matters. And we read the columns from top to bottom, in the clustering columns from top to bottom in the Chebotko diagram. So it could be C or D. When I look at that, I now need to look at the direction of the clustering columns or the ordering. The symbol column is ascending. By the way, that's the default order. And the trade ID column is descending. So I look at C and D, and they both specify the trade ID column is descending. C doesn't specify the clustering order for the symbol column. D does, and correctly specifies it as ascending. The other rule, and we actually had this rule earlier, I said in a where clause, if you constrain any clustering column, you have to start with the first or leftmost. It's the same thing if you define clustering order. If you define a specific order, then you have to start with the leftmost or first. And even though symbol is in the default order, it's ascending, the clustering order by clause needs to start by specifying the order for symbol. C does not. It acts as if the default would come into play here, but if you specify any, you have to specify the first. So D specifies the clustering order for symbol in ascending or default order, and for trade ID in descending order, it does both of them. So the correct answer here is D.
All right, awesome. Moving on to question 20. Almost there, everybody. Let's do it. All right, so consider the application workflow diagram for an investment portfolio application. Which access pattern or patterns are evaluated before an application can evaluate Q3.2? All right, let's see. The results are in, and the correct answer here is A. This one's tricky, and hopefully you learn something from this one, and then when you go to actually take your real exam, you won't get tripped up on this one. Let's hear how badly you tricked them, Dave. Why were you so tricky? Seriously.
Yeah. Had to do it for one. That was actually, the answers were the most spread out across the board.
Yeah, they were.
For this one. So the question is, which access patterns are evaluated before an application can access Q3.2? Really we're asking what are the prerequisites for Q3.2? If you notice the diagram, what you see in the diagram is Q1, Q2, and Q3. And the way it's drawn, Q1 is the prerequisite for Q2, and Q1 is the prerequisite for Q3. Q2 and 3 do not have a dependency on each other. All right, but what about Q3.2? Where did that even come from? You look at the enumeration of data access patterns below, you find out that Q.3 is actually made up of several patterns, Q3.1, Q3.2, Q3.3, and so on. So I like to think of Q3 as being a virtual or abstract pattern, which is implemented by Q3.1, Q3.2, and each of those individually. If you think of it that way, then Q.1 is the prerequisite for Q.3, but Q.3 is all or one of those 3.1, 3.2, and so on. So the only prerequisite for Q3.2 is Q1. And again, you have to take a pretty close look at this and be familiar with the syntax. But the correct answer here is A. And that brings us to that was the last question in our sample exam. So good job, everybody.
Yeah, let's see. So if you take a look then, if you, again, there were 20 questions total, each was 1,000 points. So if I go back to the leaderboard here for a second, you should see how many total points you had, right? And passing, right? If this was a real exam, passing would have been 70% or 14,000 or more, right? So if you got 14,000 or more, then you would have, in fact, passed the real exam. Now, in the real exam, you have 60 questions, right? You get a little bit more of a spread there. But hopefully that gives you kind of a feel, right? And again, when it comes to going through, and preparing yourself for the exam, absolutely go take a look at the Academy courses that we've linked you to. Also these, right here, these Catacoda courses we have. Again, all this is free. These Cassandra fundamentals, the new data modeling course. This fundamental course, actually, in Catacoda, is essentially how would I put it? A re-implementation of everything in 201, I believe. And the difference, what Catacoda does, this is actually really cool. And this is especially for those of you who may not be able to use a VM. I did see some questions earlier. I think I saw somebody trying to use a VM in Linux or whatever was running some issues. Or if you just don't have the resources to do it, Catacoda is really cool because it will actually spin up the Cassandra instance for you up in the cloud through your browser. All you need is a browser. It does everything else for you. So you can actually go through all the fundamentals and everything like that there. This data modeling course, this has real life data modeling use case examples in there. It's really an awesome resource to kind of really solidify your knowledge and everything. So if you do have a problem running VMs at all, or if you just want to check them out, I highly suggest taking a look at these courses. Again, they're all free, and do this along with the Academy content, right? And I think between the two, you'll have everything you need to prepare yourself and be very, very ready to take the exam. Okay, as I mentioned before, if you have follow-on questions or anything like that, go to the Discord. Some of you are already there. Always go to community.datastacks.com, especially if you have longer form questions. We have folks around the world and stuff, and people in the community who will help answer those. Always feel free to reach out to us, right? If you want to hit us up on LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever, always feel free to come reach out. And with that, everybody, thank you so much. How are we doing? Any tail-end questions there? No, it looks like we're good. And we'll actually give you 2 minutes back. What do you know? You get 2 minutes back. But again, hopefully you guys got something out of that, and that you kind of gives you an idea of what kind of questions to expect. And let us know definitely when you go to take your exam. Let us know how you do. If you pass, go shout about it. Go put it on your LinkedIn. Make sure you definitely mention us, and then we can kind of go ahead and kind of talk about it as well. Up on the social media platforms and give you some good street cred. All right, with that, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you again next time in our next workshop. Take care. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And as always, don't forget to click that subscribe button and ring that bell to get notifications for all of our future upcoming workshops.
Imagine a being gifted with powers from the goddess of Cassandra, who grew those powers until she could multiply at will, move with limitless speed, and unmask hidden knowledge. With those powers, she was able to fully understand the connectedness of the world. What she saw was a world in need of understanding. From that day forward, she sought to bestow her powers on all who came into contact with her, empowering them to achieve wondrous feats.